Hey friends, thanks for tuning in to Conversations in the Wild, a Maverick River podcast. It's been such an incredible season and we're close to wrapping up with just 2 more episodes. But the goal of Conversations in the Wild is to ignite genuine, authentic discussions among men. Guys don't readily open up. But this podcast is meant to encourage by interviewing amazing people and having them share their stories, their victories, their trials, their hardships, so that we men can do a better job doing that with each other. We are wired to do life in community and to not just isolate, but to share things that are going on so that we have a brotherhood and a support to walk with each other through the good and the bad. And I'm very excited for today's episode because we have this legendary skateboarder named Jamie Thomas. And Jamie is a professional skateboarder. He's been around in the industry for many, many years. He's an entrepreneur and absolutely shreds at skateboarding. He's 49, soon to be turning 50, and he still is out there shredding. Jamie was the founder of Zero Skateboards, which is a really famous skateboard company. He's famous for this one big trick called the leap of faith, which is ironically a big part of his story in surrendering his life to Jesus through many, many years of trying to figure out what life's truly about. But he's also very famous because around 1999, I believe it was, I was a senior in high school. One of the greatest video games of all times came on the scene, and it's called Tony Hawk Pro Skater, or Pro Skateboarder. And Jamie was one of the skateboarders that you could pick and shred along with. And he got really big as a result of that video game. But he's a joy to have. I think you're going to be really inspired by his story through many trials and victories. But I love how honest he is in his story of faith. He came to a place where he just fully surrendered and kind of gave up and said, all right, God, I need you. But the honest part about that is that happens often in our stories more than once, where we can drift. Even though we give our life over to Jesus, we can re-drift and go a different direction. And that happened with Jamie. So there's been multiple times where he's had to get on his knees and surrender to Jesus and say, all right, I can't be in control anymore. That wasn't working for me. And Jamie is very honest about that. And I think you're really going to enjoy this. Please continue to share this podcast. Thank you for listening and being a part of Maverick River. Check out maverickriver.com for all the different ministry stuff that we're doing. And thank you again for your support. All right. Welcome, everyone. It's Tim here from Conversations in the Wild, Maverick River podcast. So excited for today's episode. If you've ever played Tony Hawk Pro Skateboarder back in the day, one of my favorite skaters to use at the time, his name was Jamie Thomas. And we have a legend with us today. And I'm really excited to have Jamie because we got connected through a friend, and he just shared that God has radically got a hold of Jamie and changed his life. So I'm really excited to have Jamie and for him to share. He's been very successful in the business world, successful as a skater, and I'm really, really excited for you guys and myself to hear his story and how God's changed his life. And so welcome, Jamie. Thanks for being on today.
Thank you. My pleasure, Tim.
Well, I'd love for you to just start. I don't know how far back you want to go, but like maybe it's just, how'd you get into skateboarding and what, give us the full gamut of the story of how you started skateboarding and how I think you told me, hopefully it's okay to say, you're going to be celebrating your 50th birthday and you're doing some epic things with that. So maybe we start from, I don't know, maybe it's 5-year-old Jamie picking up a skateboard for the first time. And then how'd you get here?
Okay. Well, I didn't, I was 9 years old or 10 years old the first time I ever saw a skateboard. I grew up in Alabama until that time, first 10 years of my life were in Alabama. I was born in Florida, but like just, maybe 6 weeks old, moved to Alabama. My father was a nuclear engineer and
Oh,
he got
wow.
a job. Yeah, he got a job opportunity in Alabama. So I grew up, the first 10 years of my life just completely in the sticks, like chickens, pigs, goats. Not necessarily a farm, but definitely in the woods, like surrounded by like 10 acres of woods.
Oh, wow.
Closest house was like a quarter mile away. So definitely grew up in a like country environment and took a bus to an elementary school. But when I was in fourth grade, my father moved us to Atlanta for a year. He got a job opportunity for the power plants. He basically bounced around from power plants in the tri-state area, Alabama, Georgia, Florida. And so in fourth grade, he accepted a job in Atlanta. And when we moved, um, I saw a skateboard that was my sister's from the 70s. And this is like 1984.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I saw this board and I didn't even know what to call it. Like I'd never seen a skateboard before at this time. And my sister, was like, "Oh, that was mine, from when I was a kid." She's 7 years older than me. I'm the youngest of four. And
Okay.
so she showed me like how to push and tic tac and like how to walk the dog and like these old school 70s tricks.
Love it.
And yeah, it was like a fiberglass, like banana board style, which now looks kind of like a penny board, but without the kicktail.
Right, right.
Anyway, I was just enamored by it. I thought it was so cool. And I rode it around the neighborhood. And then, there was a couple other kids that had skateboards in the neighborhood, but, anyway, it was just something to like, keep me busy. The next year, my father he moved us back to Florida or back to Alabama for the summer, and then he accepted a job in Florida. So in fifth grade, I lived in Florida, and this is like Florida is kind of like probably 5 to 10 years behind California at this time. So skateboarding was blowing up in California, I mean, in Florida, and the Bones Brigade and Tony Hawk, Steve Caballero, Mike McGill, those guys were mega popular there, and
Hmm.
everybody had skateboards at my elementary school, and I just I was like, man, I've already been like hyped on this, and then now everybody has them, so I got a more modern board and started getting into skating. So I was about 11 years old when I really got into it, like discovered it at 10, 9 or 10, and then 11 started trying to learn tricks and like learn bonelesses and learn how to ollie. And then there was tons of kids at my elementary school that were skating. And so I lived in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida for fifth, sixth, and half of seventh grade. In the middle of seventh grade, my father moved us back to Alabama. And at this time, I was really plugged into the skate scene and like the like punk music scene and stuff. And I was loving living my best life. Looked like I was out of like a movie, like from the '80s, like thrashing.
Yeah,
And
that's awesome.
yeah, going in the movie theaters on Friday and Saturday and skating around the theater. And there's an ice cream shop, and everybody's like learning tricks on the curbs. And anyway, so I was really into it, and it was a big deal in my life. But then moving back to Alabama was, I anticipated it to be a harsh transition because, I remembered my youth there and it was like, pigs and chickens.
Right.
My parents told me we were moving into the city. We weren't going to live in the country, which was cool. But at the same time, I knew it was going to be a harsh transition, and it was harsher than I ever could have imagined. It was like
Mm.
everybody was, football is a religion in Alabama, similar to Texas. And,
Yeah.
and everyone wore like, plaid shirts tucked into their khaki pants. And this is at like a public school. It was really like everyone had a uniform. And then I had like, this is like 86 or 7. And I had like big blonde bangs, like Tony Hawk haircut.
Right.
And, and had really baggy shorts and a baggy shirt, like wore pink a lot. And like I stood out like a sore thumb. So that was junior high. And junior high is a tough enough time period and an awkward enough time period,
No doubt.
not even needing to like throw in this type of wrench. So I really struggled in junior high with like identity and trying to fit in. And anyway, so that's when I discovered skateboarding, and that's kind of how I got into it.
And so also you had community and friendships in Florida. Those
Hmm.
got left behind. Re-engaging in Alabama, you now have this 80s skate culture vibe, and no one's really into it, I presume, in Alabama. So you kept skating, like, as part of the process of your struggles, and what happened next? Like, how did you go pro at some point?
Well, I struggled with keeping skating because I was the only kid at my grade that skated, and it was tough. I met some BMXers, and BMX was like close enough to skating that I could identify with it. So I started riding, and I had a BMX bike in Florida too. It was like how you got around as a transportation, but I'd never really jumped. So I met this guy who was, really good at BMX, and he kind of taught me the ropes, and I started BMXing at the local BMX track in Alabama because they had a BMX track. And that was kind of like, that was as rad as I could get and connect with and build a community or be around a community. So I started BMXing. And then one day I was at the BMX track, and there were these guys in the parking lot, and they had a launch ramp, and they were older guys. They were in high school, and they were really good at skating. They were way better than I was when I moved there. So this was the discovery that, oh, wait, there are skateboarders that live in this town. I just didn't know about them. And I'd probably been BMXing for like a year, and I was kind of skating a little bit, but not really anymore. And these guys were doing like 360s off the launch ramp and like judos and stuff. And like it was
Wow.
kind of advanced. It was kind of advanced for where I was at. So I just went up, started talking to them and like looking at their boards and stuff. And there had been some progression in that few years of the shapes of boards and stuff, but anyway, it kind of sparked my interest in skating again. And so I skated and rode BMX for a little while, but eventually I started meeting all the guys around town. Now I'm older, I can ride my bike a little further. Some of these
Mhm.
guys are driving. I could like, get rides with them and go to skate spots and meet other skaters. So I kind of, like struggled through junior high, like sports and the Future Farmers of America was popular in my junior high. So
Right.
it was a pretty big culture shock.
Sure.
But connecting with these skateboarders and realizing that there is a scene, it's just fragmented all over this small town. I got to know everyone. And then as I got into high school, we started traveling all around the Southeast together and skating all the small towns, and then, taking trips down to Florida for contests. And I started getting exposed to better and better skaters.
Hmm.
And I started learning as well. And, and I also discovered that I had an ability to conceptualize a goal and push myself further than most of my peers. And
Sure.
it was like, if I wanted to learn something, I would get obsessed about it. And I would just practice and practice and practice. And I was relentless about learning and progressing. And so I really started kind of getting a little bit of attention locally, for being, I don't know what you'd call it. It's like, good at skating, but it was really just because I was so passionate about it and so obsessed. So
Yes.
I started entering contests all around the area and started winning contests, and that was like positive feedback. Then I started, filming myself skating with my friends. We were all just filming each other. And then I put together a video, sent it to California, started getting free skateboards from a brand in California. And it was kind
Which
of like
brand?
real skateboards.
Okay.
It was kind of like a regional sponsorship. Like they didn't necessarily want me to come to California, but regional sponsorships work like, okay, you'd be a good representative in your area, and you may influence the other people in your area to want to ride our brand.
Hmm.
So they basically sent me boards, to help me out and to kind of have a regional influence. But I took that as, you guys want to do something with me, and I'm just now building a dream of how to get to California.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was definitely a regional sponsorship. And school was always challenging for me because I was so passionate about skateboarding that it was in conflict with, a consistent kind of like school regimen. And I was the youngest of four, so I was a full latchkey kid.
Hmm.
My father was deep in his career at the power plant. My mother was an interior designer, and I was really like pulled between these two and my skill sets, but I just didn't really have a passion for school. And organized sports were interesting to me, but I didn't have a means to get signed up and to go to them and to get taken to them. And, I
Right.
wasn't playing, traveling baseball or soccer because there was no one to take me anywhere.
Hmm.
So skating was kind of like a default thing that I just did more and more of. And as I got better at it, I just started dreaming of doing something with my life in skateboarding. And I struggled in school. The more I dreamed about California, the more of a waste of time school felt, because I wasn't engaged and I didn't have the modeling or mentorship in order to be able to show me a path in school that could work. So I saw just dead end after dead end. And my dream of California was a figment of my imagination. It was just like, I'm just dreaming. And then there was a guy, about his name was Chris Markovich, and he was from about 2 hours south in Florida, and he made it, and he moved to California with his family, and he started showing up in magazines. So he went from like being a hometown hero like a few hours away from me to being in magazines. And that for me was like, okay, this is possible. This is possible to transition and make the jump from where we live to there. Granted,
Right.
he lived
Someone
in
did it. It's possible.
someone did it. Yeah, he had his family support, and he lived in Florida, which he already had a leg up because there was contests, there was a scene, there was skate shops. We didn't have any of that. So we were responsible, like this 10 or 20 man crew was responsible for, the scene. And, we were kind of bumbling about trying to figure it out. But at any rate, he started to blow up. And as he blew up, it just showed me what was possible. It was almost like he built a bridge from the South to California and showed me how to do it. And so once he did that, I was like, that's it. Like, school is a waste of time. I quit school, got a job at Burger King, started saving up for a car, and
What year
everything
was
was a
that? What year were you in school at that point?
1991.
So like junior or senior or
Yeah, about a junior, but I was kind of, I wasn't really passing all of my classes, so I was like half sophomore, half junior. Um, I would have been in school for, probably another 2 years if I
got it.
went that conventional route. And I, my parents checked in like, how are your grades? But they'd check in like once a month, and that was enough for me to kind of evade and dodge that question and
Hmm.
try and get around that and just keep doing what I was doing. So, and when I quit school, man, I doubled down on skating, and I was skating around the clock. I was filming, I was dreaming up this, like, how am I going to get to California? And I knew I needed a car. So, my dad told me, like, hey, if you want to buy a car, raise half the money and I'll match you. So I started saving. I got a job at Burger King and started saving for a car. Worked split shifts, made biscuits in the morning, went home, took a nap in the day, and came back for the, evening shift. And I did that for months until I was able to buy, like, kind of a beater car for a couple of grand. And
There
and
you
he met
go.
me in the yeah, he met me halfway, and I bought a car, and then I was all around the southeast, and then within like 3 to 6 months I was, dreaming up the next move, and I was going to California. So, and I'd won a couple of local contests, and I'd qualified for this contest in, Texas, and that was halfway to California. So I was basically just like, I'm on my way, and I'm 17 at this time.
Man.
So yeah, so I basically moved to California at 17, a couple $100s with a couple of buddies, and we were homeless for a while in San Francisco. And eventually, this guy let us sleep on the floor and pay $50 a month, and I was able to get a job and get off the streets. And then I filmed
Was
another
that
spot.
was that in San Fran that your
Yeah,
friend let you? Okay.
yeah. We slept at this skate park, or this skate spot in downtown San Francisco at the Embarcadero. And this guy who you always used to come and skate really late at night. I actually told this story on the Tony Hawk podcast, just like a couple weeks ago. But anyway, this guy that used to come and skate late at night, we befriended him, and he was like, "Oh, I live in like, I live in a studio apartment right in the ghetto, but it's a roof. If you guys want to move in with me, you can just pay me rent." So we just slept on his floor, and I was able to get a job then and get off the streets. And then I got a job selling shoes, and then I started filming another sponsor me video. Needless to say, I did not get on Real Skateboards. I got to California, and they were like, "Yeah, I don't think this is going to work out." I mean, I was this country kid with like an accent, and really rough coming from a small town in Alabama, landing in San Francisco like another fish out of water. It was very alienating. It was almost like, coming to Alabama from Florida. It was like
Right.
that much of a harsh transition. So I just started filming and pushing myself and, trying to work on my skating the best I could and kind of learning from the school of hard knocks from my peers that, I knew I didn't fit in, and I tried to, just observe and figure out how I could continue to progress as a skateboarder. And gradually one thing led to another, and someone saw my video and they, offered me an opportunity to ride for this small upstart company. And then they gave me a chance, and I ended up turning pro for a small company. And I just kind of built on each opportunity. I started getting a few photos in magazines, but this is like I got to California in the summer of 92, and I turned pro around the summer of 93.
What does it mean when you say I turned pro? Like, is one of these companies actually paying you? Is that what that means?
Yeah, it means that you have your name on a pro skateboard and you got to design the board and you get royalties for it.
Okay,
Granted, the company was really small, so I'm making a few $100s a month.
got it.
And I'm still poverty level, and it's not enough to take care of myself. So I kept working the shoe sales job while, I have a little bit of money coming in from skateboarding. And then once I could get the money coming in from skateboarding up to like $500 or more, I
Hmm.
quit the shoe job.
Got
I
it.
actually saved up. I actually saved up several months' expenses, and then I got to $500 a month consistently, and then I quit the shoe job, and then just kind of lived as a pro skateboarder, like lived that life for a little bit. And then I eventually got an opportunity to ride for a better brand, and I moved to San Diego because that brand was located in San Diego, and just kind of continued to like just work hard and try to put my best foot forward, and you know like approach each relationship and each person that I met, whether they be photographers or people in the industry, with respect, and just tried to build on the resources and the skills that I had.
So, what point did you start your own skate brand, and then like the Tony Hawk Pro Skater? Like, there was like a massive, big. Was that like late '90s then?
Yeah, so I moved to San Diego in 94,
Okay.
and I rode for a smaller company in 94 and part of 95, but in 95 I got sponsored by Toy Machine, which was a bigger company, and it is run by Ed Templeton, who's a well known artist and pro skateboarder
Hmm.
in the skateboard world. And so he gave me an opportunity, because I was really motivated and I was filming a lot and I was learning to use a camera and I wanted to edit and make videos. So he basically gave me the keys to the video program at Toy Machine and said, "Hey, I'd love to have you help me build a team and film the video, and if you want to edit it, you're welcome to do what you want to do." So
Wow.
I started filming and making videos for Toy Machine. I made two videos, one in 95, one in 96. And then I started dreaming up, once I had gotten an understanding of how a skateboard company worked inside and out, I started dreaming up my own brand. So I started Zero Skateboards in 1996. So this is
Okay.
all kind of happening pretty fast.
Yeah, it is.
Um, yeah, so I'm, you know, 21, almost 22, and started Zero Skateboards through the same distribution company that Toy Machine was run through. I still rode for Toy Machine and started Zero as a small upstart. And then once Zero started kind of catching on, I switched over from Toy Machine to Zero. And then I started filming, directing, and editing the Zero videos. And by this time, I'd had a good understanding for what made a skateboard video special. And so I started to try and put together these epic videos with my friends. And, that became what helped my career take off. Meanwhile, I was in X Games, the first X Games, and I won like best trick contest. And then, I had some success in contests, but not really. Like, I really just loved curating, filming, editing, and putting skateboard tricks to music, and like that was what I dreamed of, and that was what I dreamed of
Sure.
as a kid, and that was what I really gravitated towards, and that's what influenced me as a kid. So it would only make sense that I would emulate that, and that would become, my driving force in skateboarding was is that I was making videos. And so I made videos pretty much every year, every other year. I made the first Zero video in 1997. When I say made it, meaning like I filmed the team, I had the team film me, and I would, direct and edit and, put this video together, produce it. And then I shared the production with the owner of the distribution company. So we released a video from Zero in 97, and that had, what would be coined um, this big gap I tried in at Point Loma High School called the Leap of Faith.
Mm-hmm.
That came out in 97, and that was, a really big catapult for my career because I had tried something. And, what I tried, the Leap of Faith is basically an ollie over a two-story handrail and then down the drop. And at that time, it was probably about 5 feet higher than anything that had been attempted.
Wow.
So it had this like this allure to it, and I didn't make it. So it kind of like was like, is this possible? What's next? Like, what's possible? So, and then I made another Zero video, and then we were kind of off and going. 1999, I made a video called Misled Youth, and that basically was like my third video. That was like my major video that I was in, and that really caught the attention of the skateboard community. I won a few awards for the video part, and then that was the same time that Tony invited me to be in the Tony Hawk Pro Skater video game. So that was 99. And then I had a really gnarly knee injury in 2000, and then battled knee injuries for the next 4 years or 5 years, but
Oh
was still
man.
skating in between all those knee injuries. I tore my ACL and fractured my femur, and basically just went on and off through injuries. And I learned so much. And, I actually became a believer during that time. It really humbled me. I thought I was invincible. I thought I was bulletproof. And I thought I could do anything, because at that point I'd kind of overcome some pretty,
Yeah.
major obstacles, and I kind of had that foolishness and that pride, like, really like it was strong. So
Well,
yeah,
so what was the kind of pivotal moment? I mean, obviously that, like you said, that it all really happened, escalated quick. You got to California and, just a few years later, you were filming your own videos and producing your own videos with your own company, Zero. Zero is more than just skateboard decks. It's a whole clothing line, if I'm not mistaken.
hmm
And there's, you know, it's pretty successful brand if I'm not mistaken, even to this day. Is that right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, we part of it, the success was from Zero, and part of it was I had pro shoes and, pro model accessories and stuff. So it was pretty much like shoes, Zero, and Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Like those
Yeah.
were the three main categories that really catapulted my career. Yeah, and it was crazy to go from being homeless in 92 to running my own brand in 96.
Yeah, that's
So
incredible.
yeah, it's a pretty radical trajectory. But it came with a lot of um, a lot of struggles, and but not really. I was kind of coasting, and things were just kind of working out. Um, so until I got into the injury phase, I felt like I was unstoppable. When I got into the injury phase, um, I kind of started slowing down a bit, and I started seeing things that were happening around me. I met my wife along this journey. We met in 95, got married in 97. We're really young. I'm 22 and she's 19.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and we kind of got married because she grew up in a Baptist home, and her parents, she was adopted, but she grew up in a Baptist home, and they were really, really upset that, we were living together, and not married. And, I felt some pressure, but, I loved her, and she challenged me in all the right ways. And I was just, I'd kind of like already, had my time chasing girls and stuff. And I just wanted to be done with that. And I thought she was awesome. So I asked her to marry me. And, we got married solo at the courthouse. We had one witness, but for the most part, we didn't really have a wedding because she wasn't really talking to her family. And, I'd left my family in Alabama and Florida, and I'd been in California, for now 5 years. So we just kind of got married for us and
Wow.
started that journey. She was a believer, and she grew up in a Christian home, and we had lots of engaging conversations and debates, and it was really a healthy challenge for me. And I think that that was the time where I God opened the back window to my heart, or the
Hmm.
back door, where out of respect for her, I stopped condemning, you know, the idea that, you know, God wasn't real. And I stopped kind of naysaying that because I wanted to have a healthy relationship with her. And that was the step one. And then a few years later, a professional skateboarder named Tim Brosh, he actually passed away suddenly from a heart condition that his family had known he'd had, but he really hadn't had many complications. And he was coming out of a Mother's Day brunch with his mom, and he's my age, and he just fainted and then passed away right there. So
Jeez.
I got invited to his funeral, and this is 99. So, I'm 24 or 25 at the time. I got invited to the funeral, and the funeral was so packed with skateboarders that they couldn't fit everybody into the main sermon hall. So everyone was just in all these little rooms at the funeral home. And they had speakers in the individual rooms. If you couldn't see the service, you could at least hear it. And
Hmm.
so I sat with about 20 other people just staring at a wall, listening to these people pour out their hearts about Tim. And Tim was a great guy. I kind of knew I was a little bit of an a-hole, and I was abrasive and I was obsessive, and I was pushing really hard to, be successful. And that was that. But I knew Tim was a really good guy, and everything I'd ever seen of him, heard of him, um, I knew I knew he was a better guy than me. And these people
Hmm.
were pouring out their hearts about Tim, and that he was in, saying that he was in a better place and that he was a believer. And I just started feeling this overwhelming selfishness that I was choosing to be apart from God on a daily basis. And my wife has been pleading with me and praying with me. And so many other people have been praying with me, praying for me. And my mom had been praying for me. My mom is a believer. And I basically, it became super clear of all of my selfishness. And then I had this crazy, insane, which felt like a divine intervention in my life, where I started having, I know you've probably experienced this, but as a kid, if you did something wrong and nobody knew about it, you were like, okay, this is my secret to keep. I'll push this down. And then if something else comes up, you either cheat on a test or you get caught or something happens to you and your parents don't know, I would press that down. I would press all these things down, or lies that I would say and not get caught for, or things that I would get caught for, but other people not know. I just pressed all these things down, and I realized that I was like filled with lies, and I didn't know at the time, but it was basically sin. I had been compartmentalizing sin my whole entire life with
Wow.
no release, no redemption, and no repentance. And so all these ideas and thoughts and things that I had done and said all just started like almost like I opened a box and there's like a bunch of bats coming out.
Yeah.
It all just started coming to the top like really, really rapidly. And I couldn't process it and I couldn't deal with it, but it was crystal clear what was happening. Like
Right.
I was remembering, memories and thoughts and things that I did from like childhood, and I'm in my mid 20s. Anyway, I fell out of my chair onto my knees and just started begging the Lord to help me, to help me process this and to relieve this burden. And then my wife just put her hand on me, and a pastor came over and put his hand on me and prayed with me. And I
Was this at
basically just said,
this was at the
this
memorial
is at the
at Tim's
memorial.
memorial,
Yeah.
right? Okay, wow.
Yeah. So I'm just like, you know, I'm just professing like, Lord, help me, save me, help me. I can't do this anymore. I can't live
Mm.
this life anymore. And at this time, I was probably, an addict of the world, but like I wasn't like a criminal. I was like running a skateboard brand. I was married. I was trying to walk the line, but there's sin in my life regardless, and I never really dealt with it. And
Right.
so it basically from childhood all the way to mid 20s just started coming out, and I basically said the Lord's prayer right then, and then that was like a Thursday or a Friday. And then on Sunday, my wife and I went to North Coast Calvary Chapel, and they started with the 10 commandments, and it was commandment number one. It was like it was like church started for the first time, and
Yeah.
I hadn't been to
Chapter
church since I
one
was,
for you.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so, um, I hadn't been to church since I was, 13 or something. And it was kind of like I was drugged there and I was just trying to take a nap. So, needless to say, I was all in and I was on fire for the Lord. And I started like, you know, listening to K Wave and studying the Bible and like, paying attention at the sermons. But really quickly after that, I started getting calls from everyone that found out I was a Christian because I put out a crossboard pretty much right away,
Mm,
a board because Zero has had skulls and it's portrayed all this darkness. And I wanted to like, the company already existed. We had pro riders. It was already this thing, this bold iconography, iconic imagery. And I wanted to bring in some prophecy in order to challenge that. And I've continued to do that. The company is still like conflicted and it's not a Christian company. And I just try to everything I have a direct hand over, I try to make sure is, a profession of my faith. And then some parts of it are dark, and I have other team writers where I let them do what they want, and I do it, I do what I want. So it's kind of like this real life juxtaposition of a brand that is
hmm.
somewhat challenging for me, and it's becoming harder and harder for me to navigate, especially the more I walk with the Lord. It's conflicting and it's hard. So at any rate, I had a crossboard, and then my phone started ringing off the hook to go and speak and to go tell kids and people about my faith and to be this like, like evangelist. And I didn't know what I was doing. I just felt like, God wants me to share this. God wants me to do this. And I felt like in like a year to probably 2 years, I got pretty used up and I was wrung out. And then I kind of like drifted away a little bit because I was exhausted. And I'd been put into these hellfire and brimstone situations where I give my life story. And then pastor comes up behind me and gives a hellfire and brimstone service where they try and use a scare tactic to scare all these skateboard kids that they've used me to lure to their church to like scare into accepting their
Mm,
faith or accepting the Lord. And I kind of got burned out, chewed up, spit out, and I'm not blaming anyone.
hmm.
I just was so young and I didn't know how to walk that line.
Right.
And so I kind of drifted away for a few years, and then I, would come back into, you know, being on fire for the Lord, and then, fade away. And I kind of struggled with this for probably a good 10 to 15 years, until I got into like my, midlife season where I started hitting some roadblocks that I couldn't get around. And there was like I had tried all the techniques that I'd learned in business, and I started doubling down on the world, and my life started kind of crumbling around me.
Hmm. Well, man, thank you for your vulnerability and sharing like just your story. And I mean, I love the visual of you being in that memorial and just the spirit just overwhelmed you to the point where you dropped out of the chair and you just knew like, all right, I
Yeah.
surrender. And that's just such a common theme that so many guys deal with. I mean, people in general, men and women, but you hear it more often, I think, in a lot of guys' story of just recognizing a moment of like, okay, full surrender. I give up. I've tried things on my own terms, my own way, my own control, my own pride, and it hasn't really worked. And even with success or fame, ultimately, we all desire a sense of, I give up, God. Not a desire, but we all have this innate need for Jesus. And for some, it's kind of just this, waving the flag, I surrender, God. And that kind of sounds like a little bit of what happened, especially God was in pursuit of you. You married your wife who was praying, your mom who was praying. The power of a praying mom is no joke. And I'm sure she was praying for you daily, and then just finding yourself in a memorial of a friend, a fellow skater who you got to hear his story through, and then boom,
Yeah.
it was your story of kind of coming to Jesus. And but man, I'm sure there was moments as you look back that he was just chasing after you, and because that's what he does, he just comes after us. And so I love hearing that story. And I also kind of the thing that I was thinking of the tension that you hold, even now, I think you alluded to it, of this brand that when I think of Zero, I do think of the black shirt with the skull. I'm pretty sure like that was your character in Tony Hawk. It was maybe you in a beanie and then the black shirt and the white skull. Is that right? Or
Yeah, I
maybe
mean
you weren't in a, I
there
guess
was
you could
four
change it
different
up.
and there was four different games, that I was in, the first four. And yeah, they pretty much had this like rock and roll character, which was me. It just
Yeah.
went from, I traded the skull in for a cross,
Yep.
and that was kind of, yeah, it was like the look that I had a lot of my career, is a lot of, black clothing and, rock and roll and classic rock and punk rock. And yeah, there's a lot in there that it is, in juxtaposition, even though Black Sabbath, there's a lot of, spiritual undertones in all of it. Ozzy's a believer, and,
Hmm.
they were writing songs about, the Bible and biblical, songs, but at the same time, it all looks like darkness. So yeah, it is conflicting, and I have been at conflict and at war for a long time, and I really wish that that story of me falling out of the chair was all that it took.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I kept taking the wheel back from God and telling God to get in the back seat or the trunk or in the trailer,
Yeah.
and I continued to try and take control, especially like we're talking about a pretty radical transition from being homeless to running my own company, but then running my own company in 96, starting my own company, to entrepreneur of the year in 2006. The success like continued to kind of envelop me, like just engulf me. And
Hmm.
I started like drinking my own Kool-Aid on, like, and feeling so prideful about what I had accomplished, because this road, in lots of ways, was so difficult. It was kind of like, you know what I mean? It's a hero's journey. It's a plain and simple hero's journey. And I really can see it like in the Rocky, movies. You can see Rocky coming from, like basically like very, very humble beginnings in Rocky one, and then in Rocky two, or Rock at the end of Rocky one, he gets the title shot just randomly with Apollo. And then Rocky two starts off with that same fight scene, and then he wins in the end of Rocky two. Rocky three, he's like fully successful. He's living in a nice house, and he's got everything he wants. He's got a kid, he's got a family, but now he's kind of losing himself, and Mr. T takes that from him, and like, and then he goes into like Rocky four with the Russian, and
The best.
he's got something to prove. And then Rocky five, he tries to mentor this guy and ends up, but it's really that hero's journey. Like mine really was no different, and I really can relate to the Rocky movies because it's been pretty similarly, like my life kind of mirrors that. And I don't know if it was subconscious or if that's just like, Sly was writing to the man's story. You know what I mean? He's
Yeah.
writing to like what men fall susceptible to. But I was falling susceptible to those same things, like success and getting comfortable in that success and starting to take pride. Like, I did this, I made this. I got myself here. I am self-made, and that is after I've been a believer already, and so it's kind of like I drifted away from God, and and then now I'm a lost sheep again,
Mm.
and then it took me almost losing the whole company, losing everything I'd worked for, and then almost losing my relationship with my wife in order to fall out of the chair onto my knees again in my mid 40s.
Wow.
So now I'm 49, and so I'm 5 to 6 years after falling out of the chair again, except this time I feel like it's like I want to surrender on a daily basis, and I want to stay in that place, and I want to stay in line walking with the Lord. So now I've changed my lifestyle, and I've started to incorporate habits that not only hold me accountable but put me in community and fellowship on an every other day or everyday basis. And
Yeah.
so, I also struggled with some addiction to the world and addiction to some unhealthy habits and behaviors. And I realized as I started battling addiction and my life started to become unmanageable, I started realizing that not doing the things that were bringing me harm and that were making my life difficult was not enough. I needed to do something else instead of that. And so I started seeking the Lord in all the ways that I could figure out. I joined a 12-step group. I joined a men's group at my church. I started praying in devotion every morning. I started going to every single sermon at my church with a notebook and just took every single sermon as a college course. What can I take away from this, and how can I let this fuel me so I can make it to Tuesday to my 12-step group? And then from Tuesday, how do I make it to Thursday or Friday for my men's group? And then I'm, back at church again. So I kind of liken this process to like if someone's running a marathon in life, a lot of people you've heard say life is like a marathon, it's not a sprint. So like on a marathon, like every 5 or 6 miles, they'll have a water station. And so if the week is the marathon, then I need a water station every 2 days. And that water station is, how do I get filled up? How do I get the Spirit? And, even more so, how do I get the Spirit every day? And the only way I get that is to ask for the Spirit to come into my life and help guide me, navigate me, and then sometimes if I don't pray in the morning and I feel like I'm, feeling a little bit off, I have worship music now. I've cultivated a worship playlist that I listen to that fills me with the Spirit as I drive down down the road in my car by myself. So I realized that now I'm able to, 3, 4, 5, 6 years in recovery, I'm able to identify when I need the Spirit and when I need that fellowship. And if, I'm trying to call someone and I'm reaching out to someone, and there's two things happening there. One is I'm making the effort to communicate and connect. And what I've discovered is that connection is the antidote for addiction. So if you're struggling with addiction, it's not just not doing the thing you're addicted to. It's instead replacing that with connection. And that's what men's group is. That's what 12-step group is. That's what prayer is. That's what walking in nature is. All those things are the antidote to being addicted to the world. So if I'm feeling that addiction kind of like creeping up, or I feel something that's coming up, now I'm in a place where I have the tools and the understanding to know, okay, what do I do? I call somebody, I listen to music, I try to make sure that those water stations are always planned, and I'm always going to get, filled back up, because I've realized I can't give what I don't have. And so I've been trying to pursue that for the last 5 years. And, another thing that happened was I had a in my mid 40s, I had a full-blown identity crisis, trying to transition from a successful pro skateboarder, which some might call an athlete. I tried to transition, and I use this analogy, but it was like I was a pro skater first and foremost, a skateboarder, because that had helped me through the toughest times in my life. It helped me through adolescence. It helped me through my early adulthood. It helped me on a career. It basically gave me the tools, I thought, to kind of navigate and create something or build something, make something of myself. So I was a skateboarder first and foremost. Then I was an influencer because that's how I got paid. And so I saw myself as this, role model or whatever. And then third, I was a father. My wife and I decided to have children, and I was a father, and I needed to take care of those kids and at least, be there how I could, try and do a better job than my father. I thought that was the bar at first. And then I was a husband. And then if there was any time left in the day, I was a child of God. And if we look at that identity, it's really just exactly upside down.
Yeah.
So now if I can start my day as a child of God, make that acknowledgement first and foremost, and then give thanks for all the things in my life that the Lord has blessed me with, and then move. And my wife being, one of the most amazing things in my life, and then to go quickly to identifying as her husband and the leader of our household. And then third, I'm a father. And then fourth, I'm a skateboarder. And then, or an employee, or a guy who runs a company or whatever. And then with any time I have left, I'm here to influence others in the best way that I can, and hopefully not, in a negative way. And so, and then it's really like one thing to identify this, and it's another thing to practice it. So I started basically trying to live my life that would reflect this by the allocation of my time and what I did in what order. So that has been the most transformative process of my entire life. The last 5 years in this midlife zone where I pretty much put everything in the ditch. I put my company in the ditch. I put my career in the ditch because I was no longer focused on that. I put my relationship with my wife in the ditch, and I pretty much abandoned my walk with the Lord. And
Wow.
so I felt like, at a point where there's nothing left to live for. And instead of taking my life, I basically realized that I needed to surrender. And I did the same thing. I fell out of my chair and I,
Mm.
I went to church with my oldest son, and I was just a heaping mess. And I went up to the altar call and asked for prayer and just surrendered again, and then tried to start surrendering on a daily basis. And now I try and surrender multiple times a day if I can, and then try to, really connect and live in fellowship so I can stay on that track. So I know I kind of fast forwarded there, but
No, I
really
love it.
that's where my life has really changed. And now I'm still able to walk that because I've created a life and I've designed my life to have those checkpoints every week.
Yeah, I mean, there's a million different ways I could go because you said so much there. And again, thank you for your transparency and authenticity. And that's one of the things that we want to do on this podcast is as guys, we need to share, we need to be authentic, we need to get things out, our struggles, our victories, our trials, and you've had a lot of victories, you've had a lot of success, but in the same vein, you've lived a hard life as well with lots of struggles, trials, ups and downs. And I love that um you're so honest in that it wasn't a one time falling out of the chair and kind of face down, come to Jesus, surrender moment. We can drift. We can drift as guys. We can drift as people, and we come to know that there's a daily surrender, a daily uh, connection that is needed with Jesus to walk with God daily. One of the things we talk about often with guys is identity, and you identified that. I love this is an audio podcast, but you held up your hand and you just kind of listed out wrongly prioritizing your life, and God was at the bottom, and you just flipped your hand. The visual that I got to see, I want our listeners to hear of recognizing it's understanding that we are first, like you said, a child of God, and recognizing our identity is in Christ Jesus. That's who we are. That's what God wants us to see is this father, a father figure who takes care of us, a good, loving, and a God full of grace. We sometimes really struggle to embrace the grace and the goodness of God because it just is so foreign of I don't deserve this. And I know that all of us at times we battle that. How how could he have done that for me? The gospel of Jesus is just so radical and upside down that he would die for me in my sins, so that I might be free and live with him forever in eternity. And it's just foreign. And then I love that you kind of walk down that that identity marker and prioritization of our life that we sometimes we have to do that daily, and it's necessary to kind of re-engage on, okay, God first, and I'm a child of God, and then understanding my marriage needs to be at the highest priority even before me as a father to my parenting, and then because I need to be right with my wife to really model to my kids. I'm sure you've heard, Jamie, one of the best things we can do for our kids is have a healthy marriage, right? And then so parenting, and then all the way down, then down at 3 or 4, career, job, whatever that may be, and then the fifth for you was how do I take this and give God glory in the ways that I can give back to others. But to do that, one of the most things that you said multiple times was accountability and community connectivity. You were not only in a 12 step, but you were in a men's group, and we're always encouraging guys, we got to get in circles, we got to share, we got to open God's word and apply it to our lives, live it out. So, man, you identified so many incredible things. Your story is beautiful and so relevant. I'm thinking of multiple people that I will want to send this podcast to that love the action sports industry or athletes. And I think, and I know that's how God's using you now and getting to share your story in many different ways, and especially with the next generation, because they too are gonna be wrongly prioritizing their life and not even ever considering that God could be a part of their story. So for someone like you to share that is awesome. Any other things that you'd like to share with the audience and the listeners today about kind of where you are today? I do want to ask the question because if I'm not mistaken, you're doing like some awesome movie or video on 50 years. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know how awesome it is, but yeah, I'm trying to do my last skateboard video part, and the goal is to film 50 tricks and have it come out around my 50th birthday. Um, and the reason why it's one final video part is because it takes a tremendous toll not only on my body, my mind, but my relationships,
Hmm.
in order to narrow my focus to the point of getting and filming 50 tricks. Basically, I get it, I could go out and try a trick 3 or 4 times and still not get it. So
Right.
if you multiply that times 50, you're at 250 tries. That means 250 times, or 200 times, whatever. I've gone out and I've focused my energy, my time, and my resources on getting this trick, and that takes a lot. And I just don't think it's healthy to continue down that path. So for me, I'm trying to end the video aspect of my career with
Hmm.
intention, so I don't have regrets and I don't feel like, there's any stone left unturned. And I'm just going to give this project all that I have. And then I have a documentary filmmaker friend of mine that has asked me to do a story on my life. And so he's kind of going alongside me as I go through this journey for this last video part. And then they're making a documentary about my life,
That's
with
awesome.
this video part being kind of the through line. And so it kind of goes into my obsession and into, my workaholism and into addiction and into like all the things that have happened in my life. So I'm working on those projects, and then I'm working on, some brand stuff. I'm working on a new footwear brand, that is kind of the evolution for me. I don't think that I'm will be relevant to run a skateboard brand with a bunch of skulls and stuff, like, as I move into my 50s, and I just kind of want to, you know, realign my focus on something that represents where I'm at now in my life. So I'm working on like getting my career to line up with my personal present passions and who I am that represent me. So I'm working on that, and then I'm also, Keith Robinson, who connected us. He was my speaking coach, and he's helped me, cultivate a message. And I've been going to schools and, meeting with Fellowship of Christian Athletes and going to some Christian high schools and even public high schools and meeting at lunchtime, to share, just a really like 5 minute, or, sorry, not five, but like a 15-minute version of my story. And the main message that I'm sharing with those kids is that you can, the world feeds us a lie. And that lie is that if you look good enough, you're popular enough, or you have enough money, you'll be happy. And that, my message is that not that I look good enough, but I've had popularity beyond my wildest dreams, and I still lived with a void. And the void is that I know that I won't experience, real joy until I show up to love and serve others as Christ loved and served us. And so that is really what gives me purpose. And I'm really encouraging young people to take a look at their lives, and when they start believing that lie and they continue to wind up empty, that they know they can look somewhere else, and they can look to the Lord, and he is faithful and he is true. So, that has been something that's somewhat new to me, and that's an uncomfortable space for me. I mean,
Sure.
in an interview form like what we're doing, I feel pretty comfortable because I'm just
Hmm.
telling my story. But
Right.
when you stand up in front of, 400 teenagers, like it's tough,
No
and
doubt.
that's a tough crowd.
Yeah.
Luckily, I have, skateboarding, and that, I think is cool. And young people, it's dangerous and it's adventurous, and it'll kind of always be cool. So luckily, I have that on my side. So I open up with like a highlight reel video,
That's
so they
perfect.
know, yeah, they know that maybe I'm not, super whack. Um, but at any rate, yeah, man, I'm just trying to serve. I also have been, I give a message on a skateboarding men's group, and there's a few females, but it's primarily males on a skateboarding men's group called Mess Halls. I share a devotion and dialogue, or lead a devotion and dialogue, the last Monday of every month. So I'm trying to learn how to just be of service in any way that I can. And then serve with my kids, and volunteer, and do what we can. We went and built homes in Mexico, or Homes for Hope, and yeah, just kind of been part of Kingdom Builders at my church, and kind of feeding the homeless, and just trying to do what we can. That's it, man. I guess I'm realizing in life that it's really what we give, not what we get. So
That's right. Man, you're doing great. You're so inspirational in the way that you were able to walk us through your journey and your story. It's so relevant. And the reality is we're all on a journey together. And none of us are perfect. We're figuring it out, but at least you and I know that the answer is Jesus, and that doesn't make it easier, but it
mhm.
certainly gives us a whole heck of a lot of hope and purpose. So, Jamie, thank you so much for being a part of the Conversations on the Wild podcast today, and just being so real with us. And I know that your story, well beyond anybody listening from my podcast, but really what you're doing matters tremendously. And I know God's going to use you in powerful ways. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Tim. I appreciate it, man.